welcome to another opportunity to come together as a community of educators to advance global issues in food, fiber, and natural resources. The University of Tennessee is happy to be a global learning patron of GLAG 21. As we start today, we should orient everyone to our learning space. We'll be utilizing both the question and answer pod and the chat pod today. The question and answer pod is the place where you can add your questions whenever you have inspiration. You can also view questions submitted and click like or vote up the questions you want to make sure we answer first. We tend never to have enough time. We will address questions as we have time toward the end of the presentation. The chat pod will not be monitored by the presenters. We'll leave it open to facilitate crosstalk between participants. In fact, I encourage you to use it now by putting in your name, location, and job in the chat pod so we can see who's in the room. Thank you. Let's take action on our learning together. Our objectives for this session are to explore a professional development model to propel instructional change and to examine some of the lessons learned from teaching STEM to severely under-resourced learners. Now, in the warm-up poll, we asked you what percentage of primary school children in Botswana continue on to secondary education. And so I am curious what some of you selected as your choices. There we go. Very good. Absolutely. The correct response to that is 51%. And of these 51% of students, only 80% of them pass the secondary exams to continue on to tertiary school, which would be equivalent to our 11th and 12th grade. So that means that roughly 60% of children who start primary school will not go past the 10th grade in Botswana. So tonight we're going to talk about some of the challenges that Botswana is facing and share one tiny part of the solution where we were able to take action. So who are we? I'm Jennifer Richards. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee in the Department of Agricultural Leadership, Education, and Communications.
I'm Patsy Ritchie. I'm a second grade teacher at Hampshire Unit School, and Hampshire Unit School is about an hour southwest of Nashville, Tennessee.
I'm Sonia Cathy, and I am principal at Hampshire Unit School.
I'm Rebecca Parks, and I'm the special education teacher at Hampshire Unit School.
And so we're thrilled to be with you guys tonight. We're going to share a little bit of our journey with you. What do you notice about this picture? Take a second, examine it, look at the details. What's in the picture? Who do you see? What do they look like? What are they doing? What are some things that you notice? You can drop those right in the chat. No turf, absolutely. What else? They're having physical exercise, absolutely. One of the kids in the picture is barefoot. What do you think they're doing in this picture? Yeah, they're playing football or soccer, right? There is a ball. I don't think it's in that photo, but yes, there was one. And so the question we have tonight is, how does this picture relate to teaching STEM and agriculture in Botswana? And one of the things that we've learned in this journey is that passion often leads to taking action. And sometimes our actions have unexpected outcomes. Sometimes a soccer coach visits his ancestral home and sees a need. And sometimes organizing a soccer camp leads to an opportunity to build relationships. And building relationships opens the door to take action. And when we take action, we can change lives. Having fun leads to exploring, and exploring leads to learning. And this is our journey. So our work in Botswana occurred through our partnership with Dream Academy. Dream Academy is a nonprofit organization that was founded to teach agriculture and STEM through soccer. Dream Academy started leading soccer camps after school and during school breaks. And the unexpected outcome of that action was that on the days that they were having camp after school, attendance went up because kids couldn't come to the camps if they didn't go to school that day. And so this presented a very unique opportunity to begin infusing STEM into soccer. And that idea grew into day camps and then eventually into week and 2-week long summer camps. Botswana is located in southern Africa, just north of South Africa. It's about the same size as Texas and has a population of 2.2 million. So by comparison, Texas has 29 million people. So it's a big country with a very small population. And it's blessed with tremendous natural resources and beauty, ranging from the Okavango Delta, which you see in the top left corner, which has the greatest biodiversity of any place on the planet, to the Kalahari Desert, which is in the south and southeastern part of the country. It's also home to the to the largest population of elephants on the continent of Africa. And I cried every time we saw one that we were in country. So Botswana gained independence from Britain in 1966, and the first diamond mine opened just a few years later in 1971. The problem with that is the latest geological mapping shows that there's only about 2 to 3 decades left of diamonds until the mines run dry. In their dependence on diamonds, the country has moved away from virtually all other forms of industry. And so currently they're importing about 90% of their food from other countries, mostly Zimbabwe and South Africa. Knowing that there is this massive economic change on the forefront of the future, there's a significant national movement to reduce the reliance on foreign food imports and reestablish agriculture across the country. And all of this is happening at a time of significant climate change. And so this means that the next generation of adults and leaders in the country have to be proficient in agriculture, which means they have to be proficient in STEM and problem solving. So we were invited to come in and work with local teachers in 2 rural villages, Odie and Nklonkle, to look at how they teach STEM and how they teach problem solving. But changing instructional practice is really challenging, even when you have all the resources in the world and you have teachers who are of a similar philosophy and background. When you go into a different culture with a different school structure, and there are significant cultural and resource differences to boot, it's a significant challenge. So we decided to try something new, and we took inspiration from the medical model of using medical rounds, where medical students will follow a proficient or expert in a field, and they will kind of treat patients and in real time discuss what's happening and talk about how to improve practice. And so this allowed us to create a model that immersed teachers in an uncomfortable experience to begin with, and then disrupt their kind of preconceived notions of how we teach STEM, that instructional equilibrium, right? Then we were able to step back and allow them to learn about the pedagogy and the strategies we were teaching. They could go observe it in real time, and I'll share more about that in a second. And then we came back together as a group to talk about how they could adapt those strategies to practice within the instructional environment that their schools are situated in. So we started those workshops by we started those workshops, as I said, by immersing and disrupting kind of their instructional equilibrium. You can see at the very bottom, the far left picture, we've got those teachers lined up outside. They're doing a think, pair, share. And it took a good 30 seconds to maybe a minute and a half to even get them to start talking to one another, right? Like the dominant instructional strategy or pedagogy of the system is that teachers talk, students sit and listen and write. There's not a lot of active engagement. And so when we kicked off those workshops by getting them up out of their seat, moving them around, putting them in pairs, having them interact and do some group discussion and thinking, it really sort of rattled them. So we did a number of strategies with them. I passed out some animals and had them do some categorization. We talked about the importance of building community and trust in a classroom and what that does for kiddos' brains to prep them to be ready to learn. We talked about ways to engage higher order thinking and problem solving in the classroom and gave them some activities to tinker with that and see what it might feel like. And then we stepped back from having them immersed and walked through the pedagogy and why those strategies work, what they do for the brain. And we framed all that in a very simplistic, simplified manner of talking about the 5 fingers of facilitation, right? We engage our learners, we assess their prior knowledge, we deliver new content. Everybody likes delivery, that's the favorite one. We provide opportunities for application with feedback, and then we help them figure out how to enhance that retention and transfer that new knowledge into a new situation. So we boiled it down to something that they could physically look at and see as a teaching model. And so while this was going on, their kids were over in other classrooms on campus, and they were deeply engaged in a STEM camp that the rest of the team will talk about in a second. So after we sort of shook up their minds about what teaching could look like, and we learned about how the brain works and how the brain learns and why these strategies are effective, then we sent them out to be quiet, silent observers as their kids went through a STEM camp with an instructional challenge around irrigation that was using all the models we've been talking about. We sent them out on 3 different occasions to stop and observe and watch what was happening in the classroom, watch how their kids were responding, watch how teachers were interacting with the kids in real time, and make notes. Like, these were guided observations. They had specific things to look for. And then when they came back into the group for the teacher PD, then we broke it down even further of, okay, what did you see? Where does that relate to the strategies we talked about in here? Where are the roadblocks to using this in your own classrooms with your own students? And there were some serious roadblocks to talk through. But how can we plan for those roadblocks, and what types of modifications can you make to the instructional strategies and these 5 fingers of facilitating learning so that it can be a tool you can use in your classroom? And I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team to share a little bit from the student side of that experience.
Good evening. For this next section, you're going to be looking at 3 coworkers from a small rural K-12 school in Hampshire, Tennessee. The prospect of working with children in Africa was not on our radar. 2 of us had no zip, nada experience traveling outside the borders of the United States. There is one, Sonia Cathy, who loves taking cruises. Still, we don't feel like our story is strikingly different from someone else's story who has traveled the globe to work with children. The word is willing. So how does that word fit in with our work with the students in Botswana? Interstage left, opportunity. Were we willing? Yes, we were willing. But what would we teach? And will the children even understand us? What do we wear? What should we take? How will the supplies get there? What's the culture like? How long is the flight? How different are the children in Botswana from the children here in Tennessee? What will we eat? And then you have all those what ifs. What if? But what if? What if? Were we willing? Yes, we were willing. We took a STEM lesson about transporting water, a valuable and limited resource in Africa. We modified it based on questions and problems that had surfaced during a third grade classroom experience. We engaged the school community and the entire school district by hosting a coat drive and gathering school supplies to take with us. And fast forward to boots on the ground in Botswana.
I just cut my video off. We had challenges. Our first challenge was on day one. We decided to open up with a marshmallow STEM activity. The big challenge there was that the students started sneaking and eating the marshmallows. They couldn't resist. That wasn't something that they had on a daily basis. So even when we asked them, how are you going to build the tallest tower if you eat all your marshmallows, that they still wanted to eat the marshmallows. Another challenge for us was the language. Now, these students had studied English, but not the Tennessee dialect. And so that proved to be a challenge for them. They would ask us to slow down, repeat over and over again. Another challenge we had was the teaching methods. In their classroom, in their normal everyday classroom, the teachers stay at the desk and the students stay at their desk, and they work that way. But we were trying to implement the engineering design process. We were trying to guide them in critical thinking, and we were also trying to help them to be able to work in groups. That was like pulling teeth because all of that was so new to them. As we continued working with them on it, it became, at first they were noticeably uncomfortable, but as we continued to work, they calmed down and they were okay with us visiting their tables, and we tried to prompt their student thinking and assess their student learning. Even though they became comfortable with us coming around and comfortable with us helping them work in groups, anytime their actual teachers or any of the community members came into the classroom, they would go right back to wanting to sit at their desk and just work at their desk by themselves.
I think it was an English proverb that stated that every cloud has a silver lining. One huge silver lining for us was our willingness to come, their willingness to participate, as well as their willingness to try. As a result, we witnessed increased creativity as the lesson went on, and it was so refreshing to see the students' excitement over the small stuff, the stuff that our own students take for granted and that we as teachers take for granted at times working with them.
Now we are looking at this experience in the rearview mirror. What do we say? Do we leave an impact on the people of Botswana? Maybe a little. We hope so. We think so. So one of the big overarching takeaways for me was simply just it started at the very beginning of this experience and it went through to the preparation, the deadlines, getting there, returning back. And that's just simply do what you can where you are with what you have. On a more practical sense, that day to day, I tried to do more of the making things more active and trying to make that learning visual.
So my big takeaway was that we can do so much with so much less. The students we worked with were not equipped with the fancy supplies our students think they need. And this includes technology, even down to, the cool pencils and the cool notebooks that all of our kids think they need, but they were still so eager to learn.
My big takeaway was that we all take many things for granted, and it was very evident when the students toured us around their village and just shared their garden, the garden that they had at the school with us. Um, Also, a reminder that even when we are helping others, we can learn from them.
And it all started with a willingness to take action. We didn't have to leave Tennessee, but we're sure glad we did.
And my takeaway from this was that no matter where we are, no matter what situation we're in, no matter what resources we have, at our core, we love children, we care about children, and we all want to see them empowered to become functional and fully equipped adults. And so now we will open it up for questions that you all may have for us about the experience or our lessons learned or the model that we used either in working with the kiddos or in working with the teachers. And I believe attached to this session, you have access to the lesson plan for the STEM day camp for the kiddos. There is a fully developed lesson plan for the teacher PD. But it's still kind of in the pipeline of getting published. So if that's something that you're interested in, please just reach out to me through the app or through email, and I will be happy to share that with you once it's in a shareable format. What questions do you have for us?
So Jennifer, I'll help as we look until we find it. Of course, everybody, the Q&A pod is probably flashing numbers at you. I see a red 4. I don't know what you see, but you could open that up and add your question that you're thinking of. Or if you're like me, sometimes you're like, I can't think of a question. You might get inspiration by reading the questions of others. And we will never have enough time to answer all of them. So you want to vote for the ones that you think, oh, that's a good question, anonymous attendee. Anonymous is rocking it. And the ones at the top is where we'll start. And so from this point forward, Jennifer, I won't feed it until I'll let your panel pick, but I'll start you off with the first one. And the first question that has the most votes now, I can't do a good drum roll. I was trying, sorry, is based on this experience. What techniques would you recommend to find contact people abroad to lay the groundwork for projects like this in a school setting? How do you find your peeps, your partners in formal school settings to have great, meaningful, contextually relevant partnerships?
That is an excellent question. And I don't know that I have a great answer for that. In this situation, they came to us. They recognized that they had an opportunity to do something really special with STEM education, and they reached out through personal contacts to people they knew who did STEM education. And so they came to us already very deeply embedded with contacts in the Ministry of Education within the country and with strong in-country partners in the various villages and schools. That's a great question. I wish I had a great answer for you. I will say that having that local buy-in is essential. You have to have in-country partners who are respected and connected, and who can, when we showed up and when we were asked to come and do this workshop, um, I mean, it was not an experience like American teachers go into a professional development. I mean, some of our participants rode on a bus for like 2 hours to get to the site. They were just excited to be engaged, which was a nice kind of change from walking into a room with teachers here. Yeah, I'm sorry. I wish I had a better answer for you than that one, but that's what I've learned through that process, even if I don't have specifics on how you find those partnerships.
Jennifer, would you like to run the pod on your own, or do you want me to continue to throw you guys the questions? Your choice.
No, we'll feed off of them. I think Patsy's going to take the next.
I'm gonna respond to that one.
Mhm.
Okay, so I don't have an answer either, but I will say with this process, as far as our involvement, I would say just keep perfecting your craft and taking advantage of professional learning opportunities just like this one. Then I also know that the whole way that we got involved, it was a combination of a grant, a partnership with a university, and then a partnership with a nonprofit. So just kind of searching out some of those nonprofits, as well as connecting with your local, whether it's a community college or a university, and just, asking questions and finding, eventually, hopefully there'll be a connection made.
That's okay. So the next question that we have is about could you guys, as the teachers, share how you changed your teaching approaches or your curriculum here in Tennessee after this experience? The questioner says, often we approach international development as what can we bring to the U.S. from X country, but the learning, as Sonia said, is often two-way and transnational, and there can be mutual learning. So I'm going to mute and let you guys kind of speak to that.
I think of course, my position with teaching is being special ed. I don't have my own classroom, so I go in a lot and work with kids and help with teachers work with kids. But I think a lot of it is realizing that sometimes we just need to back up and do the simple stuff with our kids, and we don't need all the fancy stuff that they think they need or that we think they need, and bring it down to the simple and let them get creative and let them explore a little more instead of handing so much of it to them.
Ah. Okay, every time I try to talk, I turn off my camera and everything else. From the principal standpoint, because I did notice that a lot of things we do take for granted. I know my teachers, I probably have driven them crazy this year with the pandemic going on and with what we witnessed in Africa as far as students not having the things that the students in the United States have. Um, I have pushed the teachers to really, we just don't accept failure. And so I've really, twice a month, we're meeting to talk about student concerns, figure out, what's going on with students, making sure that teachers have contacted parents, making sure that teachers have talked to the students. If they've done that, then I step in and I'm calling parents or contacting parents and meeting with students, trying to make sure that they get their work done. There is no need for a child to fail when I see children in Africa that are making the most of their situation.
And then I was the one who actually tested out the plan before we went with one of my classrooms. And so, as I said before, some of those problems that I saw or some of those questions I had my students come up with, we try to find ways to think if these students are going to have trouble with us, what are we going to do? And so I know, like, when we introduced the engineering design process, we didn't just do it with pictures or just do it with words. We also had like little motions to go with it to try to help get that in. And so I know that as I came back, I always try to make sure that I had a connection. Like last week we did math, and so our book was using these different strategies for adding with regrouping, and so it looked like the numbers were stacking up like a pancake, or the numbers were being spread out like a hot dog. So just making some connections and trying to make it more visual so that they can hold it in their head. And then the motions, you know, just making it a little more active as well.
And so as I am learning how to navigate the question and answer pod, I accidentally marked one as answered that we didn't. So I'm going to go back. The question is, what would you change in making the classroom experience more comfortable for students and teachers before you started the active changes? And that is a great question. I don't know that there was a whole lot we could have done. I mean, you had Americans coming in, and we were very, very sensitive to that perception of like, here we come to show you how to do it right. And that is not how we framed the PD. It is not how we framed the STEM camp. And we had spent a fair amount of time, some on that visit and then in previous visits, in the schools, in the classrooms, observing what day-to-day looked like there. And so we were able to frame that as sort of, you know, we've had an opportunity to see your practice in action. We would like to show you a little bit about what it might look like in our classrooms. And we're going to replicate that here. And so I think the framing of that made the teachers pretty comfortable. You know, we did want to kind of disrupt that instructional equilibrium with them, but sometimes we have to disrupt to be able to create the space to learn, right? So that level of discomfort was fine and expected. I don't think there was any, and y'all can fully contradict. I don't know that there was anything we could have done to prepare the students. It was such a different way of learning. You know, I mean, they're by and large expected to sit quietly all day and listen and write. There just was not a whole lot that I think we could have reasonably done to get them ready to open up and go. Yeah. Okay, I am looking
Jennifer, as we're
through.
using technology, I'm going to help out some of our friends. And Mohammed Katiba is a participant who's staying up late and joining us from Uganda, if I'm not mistaken. And he put a question in the chat, so I am going to read that to you. It didn't make the Q&A pod. I want to make sure that we have a voice to that. How can you involve a learner with who has disabilities to become productive of others? That's the essence of the question. How do we, I know we have a special ed teacher, that we have all these different rules as we approach public education in the United States. So talk to us about, with all these good practices, how do we make sure that our instruction is inclusive of those who perhaps have physical disabilities?
How do we make sure that our instruction is inclusive with physical disabilities? I'm going to let Ms. Parks handle that one.
So honestly, with our students here, we don't have a lot with physical disabilities. We have learning disabilities, but we do have a couple with minor physical disabilities we do have to work with. And I had some at a previous school I worked at. I think it's just the big thing is knowing what their needs are and meeting them where they're at and making sure that they can engage. I wish I had a really, really better answer, but again, I haven't worked with a lot of kids with physical disability, but even when you're talking any kind of disability, it's meeting them where they're at so that they can participate and letting them be a part of. If they can't do one part, then make sure they are fully engaged in this other part that they can handle, or putting them with somebody that they can work really well with that doesn't take over and make them feel like they can't do it. So being very mindful of who they're partnered up with is a huge thing with students that struggle.
Thank you. There are a couple of quick, easy answers. One was, where did we get the marshmallows, and were we able to fly with them, or did we purchase them in country? And oh, do you want to scooch over to her screen? Miss Kathy's computer died. Awesome. Yeah, we did have to bring the marshmallows in. They were sealed. They went through checked baggage. If that wasn't allowed, no one told me and nobody said anything. And I am sorry to Customs if they are viewing this recording. And I was really glad that we did take them, though. It honestly never occurred to me that they wouldn't have seen marshmallows. Like, they were so cute with the marshmallows, and they were hiding them and coming back into the classroom after camp was over to get them, and so they could take them home and share them with other friends that weren't there. It was really cute. And then there are two questions that kind of focus around focus around follow-up and going back and doing things differently. And absolutely, actually, we had intended this past summer to go back and extend the camp over a full week for the kids. And we were still kind of working through what we would do with teacher PD. Would we continue it? Would we work with new teachers? And then the pandemic hit and it kind of turned all that upside down. We're still hoping to go back this summer. Although, each week that passes, I think that fades a little. Now we're looking, could we go in December? Are we looking all the way out to next summer? But we will absolutely go back. Dream Academy has a strong presence in the country and is very active and has, like a 20, 30-year mission that they're working toward. And we're an active part of that. What will we do differently? That's a great question. I think with the students, to some extent, I think we underestimated just based on what we had observed and what we were given in terms of from our in-country partners on what to expect. I think we underestimated a little bit what they really could take and run with. So I think that we would increase the complexity of what we were asking of them, push them to go a little deeper, push them to go a little further in their thinking and problem solving. And because we only had 2 hours on 2 days, so a total of 4 hours with them, they built their irrigation systems out of supplies that they found laying around the schoolyard. I mean, it was from things that they found in nature. Um, and so they got a chance to build them and test them, but really would like to be able to finish that design circle or design cycle and close the loop of having them test it and then redesign and test and redesign until they got to a really efficacious product that moved the water under the constraints and criteria that we had assigned. Okay. I'm scrolling through your questions. There are so many of them. I want to answer them all. We're down to like 4 minutes. So if we got to stay there for a year, what would be our number one goal for the student learners? I'll speak and then I'll hush and let them answer. My number one goal for the student learners would be to increase their self-confidence in their ability as learners, their ability as problem solvers and critical thinkers. That's what my goal would be.
We're not really sure how to follow that because critical thinking is something we've definitely, talked about even when we came back. So we would want to develop that even further for sure.
Ditto. She just said ditto. All right. So what's next? Are there other countries and other schools that this is going to be done at based on the success of the first experience? Yes. Long-term goals, Dream Academy is in the process of purchasing property that will become its permanent home base in the country. And through conversations with the Ministry of Education, with Botswana University and Botswana University of Ag and Natural Resources, all of whom we have MOUs at UT with, the goal is to create at that center sort of a model of what education could look like, to use that model as a training location for teacher prep candidates, to do some student teaching placements, to do some internship opportunities, and then to serve also as a professional development center for schools and teachers across the country to come and observe and visit, and then also to establish a private 6th through 12th grade academy with areas of focus in agriculture, hotel and tourism management, resource management, which would be part of the agriculture program, and informational technology.
Jennifer, I wanted to come on and insert. I want everybody to hear this as we end this presentation. We're so proud that the University of Tennessee as a global learning partner. This is their first year, but there's something I really want to highlight for everybody, right? What you hear is the power of collaboration, the power of working with others. that Jennifer is an extension specialist. I mean, she is not a teacher educator necessarily by training like some of my colleagues and peers, but she's working in space. And if you're listening, you're hearing about great teacher education opportunities. We create false barriers about what our roles and titles are. And these are the walls that the Global Teach Ag Network wants to tear down and just say, yo, let's do something cool. Let's make the world a better place. How can we collaborate and go forth and learn together from each other? So as we look at where we're at and building toward tomorrow and how do we help youth engage in global agriculture and toward our capstone on Friday, I want you to remember this presentation about dedicated professional educators, some teaching in formal environments and some in non-formal, collaborating and making a positive difference. I think that's really powerful that we highlight that. And I look forward to learning more. And, like I say, I'm beginning to call GLAG like the old family reunion. So when we come back around next year, I hope that we're going to be able to say, hey, wasn't it fun when together we went here, or we did this together, or we did this positive program and changed the lives of these students. So I want to give a chance, because I know that I don't do, this is the only side event that I have turned on my camera and spoke like that, but I could not resist because you ladies have inspired me. And I know that for all the teachers in the room, and as I look at the list of participants, so many friends, that I know that what you're sharing resonates with them. They said, yes, we can do this. I'd like to give you a chance for your final word, as we had so many good questions before we exit out with the sweet sounds of Dr. Tobin Redwine and our GLAG 21 soundtrack.
Thank you. No, we really appreciate your sweet words. And this was such an empowering experience for all of us on a personal level as well as professional. And it has stretched us in ways we expected and in some ways we did not expect. Some of us ate crocodile. Just going to say. Some of us ate warthog and kudu. Amazing. We want to leave you with a challenge. And here's our challenge to you. How can you take action to help your students become critical thinkers, problem solvers, and embed those qualities within an understanding of some of the major global challenges that we're facing? The challenges that Botswana faces may be different in detail, but they're not different in context from the challenges we have here or anywhere else on the planet. And so even when you're under-resourced, how can you help your students become problem solvers and critical thinkers? And with that, I will say that this is the last live presentation for today. So be sure to check out all the on-demand content and be excited for Thursday with the essential question of how can I take action to support youth global engagement? Thank you and good night.